What would you do if you walked into a nursing home and caught someone slapping the woman who once raised you? Behind those spotless white hallways wasn't peace. It was a hidden war of stolen memories, starving seniors, and a secret no one dared to expose. Until one Navy SEAL and his loyal German Shepherd walked in. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Rain drifted through the morning like a thin sheet of silver, settling over Portland in a cold, whispering mist. The streets glistened under street lamps, still fighting to stay awake, and the air smelled faintly of wet pine and the distant river. Ethan Brooks stepped through the entrance of Maple Ridge Assisted Living with the controlled precision of someone who had spent half his life moving through hostile places. He was 34, tall, broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw dusted in rough stubble. His posture, straight, unyielding, gave away his background even in civilian clothes. No matter how much leave he was given, a Navy SEAL never stopped being one. Beside him walked Ranger, a 3-year-old German Shepherd, thick sable coat rippling over solid muscle. Ranger's ears were always forward, eyes scanning the environment before Ethan even thought to. He was trained not just to follow commands, but to anticipate them. Ethan often wondered if Ranger knew him better than any human ever had. This visit should have been simple. He was home on leave after 7 relentless months overseas. Sandstorms, night operations, chaos. Most soldiers struggled to readjust to normal life. Ethan didn't have normal life to return to. He had a room on base and a dog that understood silence better than any therapist. The only person who truly felt like home was Evelyn Hayes. Evelyn wasn't blood, but she was family. When he lost his parents, she had stepped into his life with gentle hands and warm casseroles, teaching him to iron his shirt for school and how to say thank you with sincerity. She was all softness and kindness, small, silver-haired, with eyes that saw people not as what they were, but as what they could be. That kind of person was rare. As Ethan signed the visitor log, the young receptionist blinked in surprise at Ranger. Her nameplate read Simone, mid-20s, slim, curly hair tied back in a messy bun. Nervous fingers tapped on the desk as she asked, "He's trained, right?" Ethan rested a hand on Ranger's back. "Trained enough to take my job." Simone gave a tight smile and leaned in. "You're here for Mrs. Hayes? They moved her to the West Wing last week." Ethan paused his pen. "Moved her? Why?" Simone glanced toward an office door at the far end of the lobby, voice lowering as if afraid the walls could hear her. "Director's decision." Ethan's gut tightened. "For medical reasons?" She hesitated. Too long. "I don't know." She absolutely knew. She just couldn't say it. Ethan didn't push. He'd learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than answers. He and Ranger headed down the hallway. The farther they went, the stronger the smell of bleach became, overcompensating for something that shouldn't need hiding. Ranger slowed, sniffing the air, muscles tense. Ethan murmured, "Easy, boy," but his own shoulders had already tightened. His instincts, a finely tuned threat radar, kicked in, without permission. Maple Ridge looked perfect, but something felt wrong. The lights above flickered faintly, and on several doors, Ethan noticed small scratches near the knobs. He recognized scratch marks like that from trauma victims who clawed at doors when frightened. He swallowed hard. Ranger stopped again, rigid. His ears snapped forward, tail straight, and then a sharp sound cracked through the hall. A slap. Not playful, not accidental, violent. Ethan froze. His pulse detonated. Ranger lunged forward, leash pulled tight, but Ethan loosened it instantly. Together they ran. Boots hammered the floor. Breath rushed from Ethan's lungs in short, controlled bursts. The hallway stretched like a tunnel, with no end until suddenly, he rounded a corner and saw her. Evelyn Hayes, frail, 92, white hair no longer neatly pinned, but scattered across the floor. Her fragile body curled in pain beside her overturned walker. And standing above her, hands still raised from the strike, was a man. Gregory Hale, early 40s, tall, athletic, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like a uniform of power. His blonde hair was slicked back perfectly, jaw clean-shaven, cheekbones sharp enough to look sculpted. He resembled a politician, a man practiced in smiling for cameras and lying without blinking. But his eyes ruined the image. Gray, empty, predatory. Ethan's voice dropped, low and controlled. "Step away from her." Gregory didn't move. "The resident fell. She's confused today." Evelyn's voice trembled, barely audible. He hit me." Gregory's smile sharpened without warmth. She's delusional. Happens with dementia. Ethan knelt beside Evelyn, helping her sit up. I know her. Her mind is sharp. Evelyn whispered, Don't let him. Gregory cut in, voice cold. Leave the facility. Now. Ranger's growl vibrated against Ethan's arm. The German shepherd positioned himself between Evelyn and Gregory with the natural instinct of a guardian. Gregory gestured toward Ranger. That animal is a liability. Ethan rose slowly. He's the safest one here. Gregory stepped closer, invading Ethan's space, voice dropping to a venom-filled whisper. You don't belong here. You military types always think you're the hero. Ethan didn't move back. Their shoulders nearly touched, tension like electricity in the air. I don't think I'm the hero, Ethan said quietly. I just don't hit elderly women. Color flared in Gregory's face, rage or humiliation, hard to tell. Get out. Ethan ignored him and helped Evelyn into a nearby chair. Ranger stayed pressed against her leg, solid and warm, letting her grip his fur for balance. Fear was on her face, but it wasn't confusion, it was desperation. The kind of expression someone wears when they've been hurt and no one believed them. Ethan looked at Gregory, at his perfect suit and perfect lies. In Ethan's world, men like Gregory always slipped through cracks, but Ethan wasn't a crack. He was a wall. You're done putting your hands on her, Ethan said, or anyone else here. Gregory's eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're getting involved in. Ethan met his stare, voice steel sharp. I just did. In that moment, Ethan knew his leave was over. He wasn't on vacation anymore. He was on a mission, and he wasn't leaving Maple Ridge without the truth. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving Portland wrapped in a dim, gray calm that matched the weight building in Ethan's chest. Maple Ridge looked quiet, even peaceful, when he stepped through its automatic doors with Ranger at his side. But Ethan now understood that beauty, white walls, polished handrails, fake smiles, could hide rot beneath. Today, he wasn't visiting. He was observing. Ranger walked slightly ahead of him, paws silent on the tile. The German shepherd moved with a soldier's discipline, nose low, occasionally pausing to sniff the air at places that seemed perfectly normal to the untrained eye. Ethan followed without question. He had learned long ago that Ranger didn't react to nothing. As they moved deeper into the West Wing, Ethan noticed the closed doors, dozens of them. Some had nameplates beneath which faded black and white photos were taped, a life summarized by a small square image. He slowed near one door where weak coughing seeped through the crack. Ranger's ears twitched. Ethan strained to hear and caught fragments. Pain, exhaustion, desperation. He kept walking, jaw tight. In war, he could break down doors. Here, he had to gather proof before striking. A heavy cart rattled at the far end of the corridor. A young nurse pushed it, her face pale and makeup smudged beneath tired hazel eyes. She wore scrubs that hung loosely on her slender frame, her brown hair tied back in a bun that had clearly been retied several times in panic or exhaustion. Her name tag read, Nurse Kimberly. Kimberly stopped abruptly when she saw Ethan, her posture tensed, fear flashing across her features, as if expecting to be scolded. Ethan gave her a calm nod. Morning. She swallowed nervously, glancing behind her as if checking for someone. Hi. Visiting again? Her voice was fragile, careful. Ranger sniffed her pant leg, then sat, an unspoken sign that she wasn't a threat. Ethan gently lifted a small carton from the tray. This is lunch? Kimberly winced. Inside the carton lay 2 crackers and a thin slice of cheese, the kind given out as free samples in grocery stores. Ethan held her gaze. Where's the rest of the food? Kimberly's eyes darted toward a round security mirror, reflecting the hallway. Ask Director Hale. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. If he hears me talking about supplies again, he'll cut my shifts. Ethan's voice remained even, but steel edged his tone. You know the residents are malnourished. Kimberly's lips trembled. I know. She pushed the cart forward before anyone could see her hesitation. Ethan watched her go. Ranger let out a soft whine. I know, buddy, Ethan whispered. It's worse than we thought. In the main dining room, Ethan stopped cold. Ranger stood rigid, tail straight, scanning. Circular tables filled the space, but only a few residents sat there. Thin bodies hunched forward, skin parchment thin, eyes hollow and confused. They reminded Ethan of trees stripped bare in winter. Mr. Leonard, one of the residents, sat near the window. His hands were trembling as he tried to spread jam on a cracker. He was tall but hunched, his once powerful shoulders reduced to frail bones under a faded army green sweater. He might have been handsome once, sharp nose, defined brow, but now age had softened everything except the pain in his eyes. Ethan moved closer. "Mind if we sit?" Leonard looked up slowly, his voice weak but rich with old dignity. "You are new." Ethan sat across from him. Ranger lay down, resting his head on Leonard's shoe as if sensing the man's loneliness. Leonard's lips curled into a faint smile. "Good dog." Ethan lowered his voice. "What's happening here?" Leonard swallowed, throat working like every word cost him energy. "He cuts everything. Food, medicine, heat." His voice cracked. "If we die, he makes room for someone new." Ethan felt his fists tightening under the table. Leonard continued. "Evelyn tried to speak up. He made an example out of her." Ethan felt something sharp slice through his ribs. Rage. Across the room, Gregory Hale entered. The director looked perfectly composed, wearing a dark navy suit with a silver tie, carrying a ceramic mug. He wasn't handsome in a warm way. He was handsome like a reflection on a knife's edge, all sharp lines and nothing soft. His expression held effortless entitlement. Conversation stopped when he passed. Kimberly shrank, shoulders curling inward. Residents avoided making eye contact. Ethan wasn't the only one who feared what Gregory might do. Gregory lifted his gaze and locked onto Ethan. His smile was tight, artificial. "Still here?" Ethan didn't bother smiling back. "Until I'm done." Gregory stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That depends on what you think you're doing." "Watching," Ethan replied. "Listening." "You're trespassing into staff areas," Gregory said, tone colder. "I could have both you and the mutt removed." Ranger growled, a deep vibration that turned heads. Ethan leaned in slightly, voice barely above a whisper. "Try it." Gregory walked off with a smirk, but Ethan noticed it, a flicker of unease in his eyes. The kind tyrants feel when someone stops fearing them. Later in the afternoon, Ranger led Ethan toward the back storage hallway, an area marked "Staff Only." Ranger's ears stood alert, nose brushing the corner of a metal door. Ethan listened, then heard it, muffled crying. He tried the handle, locked. He glanced around, then used a thin metal card from his wallet. 2 seconds. Click. Inside was a small, bleak room. A woman in a wheelchair sat alone beneath a flickering bulb. Marjorie, her name tag said, taped to the back of her chair. She was tiny and bird-like, white curls frizzing around sunken eyes. Her blanket had barely covered her legs. Ranger approached her slowly and nuzzled. Her hand. Marjorie whispered, "They hide us back here, out of sight." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because families don't want to see what's left of us." Ranger pressed closer. Ethan swallowed the lump of anger rising in his throat. This place didn't care for its residents. It managed them like inventory. A sudden voice echoed behind him, sharp, male, hostile. "You can't be in here!" Ethan turned. A new employee blocked the doorway. Marcus Doyle, judging from his badge. Marcus was in his 30s with a heavy build and a perpetual sneer. His cheeks were unshaven, stubble forming patchy dark shadows on his jaw. His uniform fit sloppily, and his shoulders sagged forward, the posture of someone beaten down by life and eager to beat others down in return. "Director said nobody comes back here," Marcus snapped. Ethan stepped closer, towering over him. "The residents aren't prisoners." Marcus leaned in, breath sour. "If Gregory finds out you're messing around, he'll what?" Ethan asked. Marcus froze, suddenly remembering who stood in front of him. Not just any visitor, but a man trained to neutralize threats. Ethan placed a hand on Ranger's harness. "Move." Marcus stepped aside. That night, Ethan returned to his truck with adrenaline still running through him. He brushed Ranger's fur, grounding himself. "We're getting proof," he whispered. "Enough to shut this place down." Ranger licked his hand softly as if agreeing. Ethan looked back at Maple Ridge. The windows glowed with artificial warmth, masking the neglect inside. His vacation was over. The mission had begun. Night settled over Maple Ridge with the hollow stillness of a place that wanted to appear harmless. The fluorescent hallway lights buzzed faintly, giving off a sickly yellow tint instead of true warmth. Ethan walked like a shadow through the quiet wing, Ranger at his heel. This wasn't wandering anymore. This was reconnaissance. He kept his steps slow and controlled, mind calculating blind spots where cameras couldn't see him. Ranger's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, tracing invisible trails woven through the building. The dog's body language sharpened. The way his muscles tensed beneath his sable coat meant he had found something. Ranger stopped at a metal door marked Storage B7, a badge scanner attached beside the handle. The German Shepherd pressed his nose against the gap under the door and let out a deep growl from his chest. Ethan leaned in. The faint scent of dust and stale cardboard escaped. Nothing unusual, but Ranger didn't react to cardboard. He reacted to history, to emotion, to trauma. Ethan couldn't swipe the badge lock, so he pulled two thin pieces of metal from his wallet. He bent them slightly, inserted them into the gap, and applied pressure. The lock gave way with a soft click. He slipped inside and shut the door quietly. The air in the small room smelled forgotten. Light from the hallway spilled across stacks of plastic containers, some labeled, some not. Dust floated in the beam like tiny snow. Ethan moved deeper, kneeling beside the containers. Ranger sat next to him, tail stiff, waiting. Ethan opened the first lid. Inside lay jewelry, rings, necklaces, watches, each placed inside cheap zip bags with names written in marker. He lifted a small velvet box. Inside was a tarnished gold wedding band. The label read, Leonard T. Wilson. Ethan swallowed. Leonard, the man who had struggled to spread jam on crackers, had mentioned days earlier that his wedding ring fell off somewhere. It hadn't fallen. It had been taken. Ethan opened another container. More objects. Military challenge coins, old photographs, war medals. Items earned through blood and pain, thrown into plastic bins like trash. And in the smallest corner of the crate was a folded American flag. The kind handed to the family of the fallen. His breath tightened. They stole their memories, Ethan whispered. Ranger pressed his nose against the fabric and whined. Ethan pulled his phone, photographing everything. The labels, the items, the crates. This was no longer suspicion. This was theft on a systematic level. Crimes hidden behind crisp uniforms and staged professionalism. In the deepest corner of the room, he found a locked filing cabinet. Ethan pulled a small pry bar from his backpack and forced it open. Papers spilled out. Financial documents, signatures, expense reports. All budgets allocated to food and medication. All signed off as used. But real numbers didn't lie. The food budget was enough for 3 full meals a day. The medication budget enough to sustain treatment plans. Yet residents received crackers, if they received anything at all. Ethan flipped through charts until one binder caught his attention. Gray, heavy, labeled deceased, prior 18 months. His jaw clenched. He opened it. Inside was a list, not a dry statistical chart. A list of names, more than 20. A small note beside each. Cause of death listed as complications from aging or organ failure consistent with senescence. Too neat. Too identical. It's a kill list, Ethan breathed. Ranger nudged him, sensing the spike in Ethan's pulse. Ethan photographed every page. He wasn't leaving with just anger tonight. He was leaving with evidence. But as he closed the last binder, something shifted outside the door. Ranger stood alert, ears tilting forward, light footsteps, slow, careful. Ethan shut off the flashlight, leaving the room in a thin sliver of hallway light leaking under the door. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Then the door opened. A woman stood there, shocked. She was tall, nearly Ethan's height, her frame slender but strong, like someone used to standing for hours. Her skin was a deep warm brown, and her hair, straight and black, was pulled back into a low ponytail. She wore a white doctor's coat, slightly wrinkled from long shifts. Her ID badge read, Dr. Sarah Daniels, Geriatric Specialist. Brown eyes, sharp and assessing, met Ethan's. She didn't scream, didn't panic, just looked at Ranger, then the open containers and back to Ethan. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. Her voice was low and steady, carrying controlled fatigue, someone who didn't sleep much and cared too much. Ethan stayed silent, waiting to see which side she leaned. Sarah exhaled a shaky breath. You found the storage. Ethan's voice was calm steel. Storage? It's evidence. Her gaze dropped to the crates. This is why residents keep losing personal items. Gregory said families took them. Gregory lied. Ethan held up the death binder. And he's hiding more than jewelry. Sarah closed the door behind her and stepped into the room. Up close, she looked even more exhausted. Dark circles beneath her eyes, the subtle slump to her shoulders. A person stretched thin. I've suspected something for months, she whispered. Patients declining too quickly, weight loss unexplained. But every time I filed concerns, Gregory blocked them and marked me emotionally compromised. Ethan studied her face. Why keep working here? Sarah swallowed. For a moment, her mask slipped. Because someone has to stay. Someone has to see what's really happening. Ranger moved toward her, sniffing her shoes. Sarah knelt and let him smell her palm. You're trained, I can tell. She touched Ranger gently behind the ear. And you, she whispered. You're brave. Ethan asked, Can you testify? Sarah straightened. Not without losing my license. I need proof. Ethan lifted his phone. We're building it. Suddenly, a distant sound rattled the hallway. Marcus Doyle's voice echoed from the corridor, loud and irritated. I'm telling you, somebody was snooping around the kitchen last night. Sarah's eyes widened. She leaned in. Gregory's installing more cameras tomorrow. If you want to expose him, you have to move fast. Ethan nodded, adrenaline waking every nerve. Where are the medical records? The real ones? Sarah hesitated only a second before walking to a shelf and pulling out a dark green folder hidden behind cleaning supplies. Inside were blood tests, weight logs, medication charts. Every resident showed sharp declines in weight beginning the month Gregory took over. Sarah whispered, This is deliberate starvation. Footsteps grew louder. Marcus's shadow shaped under the door. Ethan grabbed his photos, shoved the records back, and motioned at Ranger. The dog followed without a sound. Sarah mouthed, Laundry room exit. Ethan reached the door, hand on the knob. Sarah whispered behind him, Do not stop. Whatever you're planning, finish it. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ranger led him into the dark hallway, silent as a phantom. They disappeared before Marcus turned the corner. Tonight proved it. This wasn't neglect. It was a system, and Ethan was going to dismantle it. The sun rose the next morning like it was uncertain whether to shine, casting a pale wash of light over Maple Ridge. The parking lot glimmered with leftover rain, and the building looked too pristine for the darkness it held inside. Ethan parked his truck across the street, the engine cooling with soft clicks. Inside the cab, he checked the flash drive in his hand, the photos, the documents, the binder of names, everything needed to destroy Gregory Hale. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, alert, brown eyes locked on each movement. The German shepherd understood tension without a single spoken word. Ethan leaned closer and whispered, Today, we end this. Ranger pressed his nose to Ethan's forearm, grounding him. Ethan first drove to the Portland Police Department. Behind the bulletproof glass desk sat Officer Miguel Sandoval, a man in his mid-30s with a square jaw, short black hair, and tired dark eyes that hinted at years of dealing with too many calls and not enough justice. His uniform stretched over solid muscle, but there was gentleness behind his expression, someone hardened by experience, not cruelty. Miguel spoke in a low, calm voice. How can I help you? Ethan placed the flash drive and a printed packet of evidence on the counter. Elder abuse, fraud, theft, neglect resulting in death. Miguel didn't flinch, but his posture shifted into full attention. He skimmed a few pictures, crates filled with stolen items, Evelyn's bruised face, the list of residents who had died with identical explanations. Miguel's jaw ticked. This isn't minor, Ethan said. It's systematic. Miguel nodded once, decisive. I'm calling a detective. He picked up a desk phone and dialed. Moments later, a tall man appeared from a hallway, Detective Ryan Mercer. He was in his 40s, lean and sharp-featured, with dark blonde hair beginning to gray at the temples. His eyes were pale blue, calculating and observant. He wore a charcoal blazer over a gray shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up just enough to show strong forearms, someone who worked more than he talked. He extended a firm handshake. I'm Mercer. Officer Sandoval says you have something serious. Ethan nodded. Ranger watched Mercer intensely, but didn't growl, as if already assessing his moral alignment. Mercer plugged in the flash drive and scrolled through the files. When he reached the death statistics, his shoulders tensed. This isn't just mistreatment, he murmured. This looks intentional. Ethan said, and it's happening right now. Mercer looked at Ethan with razor clarity. We move today. Next stop was the FBI satellite office. Mercer insisted on joining him. His presence granted faster access. Inside, a woman in a navy blazer and slingback heels greeted them. She was elegant and composed, with medium-length auburn hair and sharp cheekbones. Her voice carried authority without aggression. Her ID badge read, S.A. Jennifer Collins, Crimes Against Vulnerable Persons Unit. She looked early 40s, height nearly matching Ethan's shoulder, posture straight like a dancer. Her handshake was firm, confident. Detective Mercer says you have evidence of systematic abuse. Ethan handed her the second printed binder. Collins opened it, her eyes narrowing at each page. When she saw the photo of Evelyn's bruised face, nearly all emotion bled from her expression, replaced only by steel. Collins finally spoke. "We're getting a warrant. Today." She looked at Ethan. "Stay available. We may need you to identify locations inside the facility." Ethan nodded. "I'll be ready." By the time they returned to Maple Ridge, 3 black SUVs pulled into the lot behind them. Police, detectives, a federal agent. Even before the doors opened, employees glanced through windows nervously. Gregory Hale stood in his office, tie perfectly straight, sipping coffee as if his world was untouchable. He sensed the shift only when Sarah Daniels entered the hallway. Her usually tired eyes held fierce satisfaction. She whispered to Ethan as he walked past, "Whatever happens, thank you." Ethan gave her a small nod. Ranger stayed by his leg, silently watching. Moments later, Detective Mercer and Special Agent Collins approached Gregory's office. Collins knocked. Gregory turned, irritation forming behind the polished charm. "Can I help you?" Mercer's voice was cool. "Gregory Hale, you're under arrest for theft, elder abuse, medical neglect, and suspected criminal negligence leading to death." Gregory laughed once, short and arrogant. "You can't prove." Collins slid the warrant across his desk. "We already did." The moment he reached for the document, Mercer grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back. Gregory sputtered, "This is harassment. I run a business." "No," Collins said. "You ran a prison." Ranger stood at Ethan's side, tail still, muscles taut. Gregory's eyes met Ethan's one last time, full of venom. Ethan said nothing. Gregory was escorted out, his perfect suit wrinkled, hair no longer pristine. For the first time, he didn't look like someone in control. He looked small. As Gregory disappeared into the squad car, something incredible happened. Families began to arrive. They came with bags of groceries, containers of homemade soup, trays of warm bread. A grandmother hugged Ethan, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. A teenage boy knelt to pet Ranger, whispering, "Thank you," into the dog's fur. Patients who had once been silent and afraid were brought into the dining hall. Kimberly, eyes brighter than Ethan had ever seen, organized the meal like a general. Ranger stayed near the door, lying like a sentinel, head high, watching every caretaker, every entrance. Ethan stood back and watched residents eating warm food with trembling hands, tears of relief mixing with laughter. Evelyn sat near a window, sunlight, outlining her silver hair like a halo. When she saw Ethan, she placed her frail hand on Ranger's head. "You saved us." Ethan swallowed the ache in his throat. "You saved me first." The dining hall filled with voices again. Not cries, not whispers, but life. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a release from tension he carried for too long. He leaned against the wall, knowing he didn't need a battlefield to fight darkness. Sometimes, light was enough, and today, they brought light to a place drowning in shadow. Spring arrived quietly, the kind of gentle warmth that didn't announce itself with fanfare, but with soft breezes and patient sunlight. Maple Ridge no longer felt like a prison. The hallways, once suffocating and sterile, now carried noises Ethan had never heard before. Laughter, conversation, the soft squeak of wheelchair wheels freely moving from room to room. Ranger trotted proudly beside him, tail swinging in an easy rhythm. They weren't here to investigate anymore. They were here to live alongside the people they had once fought to protect. Gregory Hale had been sentenced only weeks after his arrest. The courtroom had been packed. Families, former staff members, residents, and strangers who simply couldn't understand how cruelty like his could exist in a place meant for love and care. When the judge announced life without parole, Gregory didn't shout or plead. He stared ahead with empty eyes, the arrogance drained. He was escorted away in handcuffs, an irony too poetic to ignore. No one stood to defend him. No one shed tears. Even the lawyers avoided eye contact as if Gregory's presence contaminated the air around him. Maple Ridge changed immediately after. A new director was appointed, Helen Whitaker, a woman in her 50s with soft brown curls, floral cardigans, and the type of warm presence that turned every room into a safe place. Her cheeks carried the natural flush of someone who spent more time smiling than frowning. She implemented transparency boards, daily visitor access, and weekly reports taped prominently in the dining room. "If we're caring for their lives," she had said, "we must honor their stories." Under her leadership, the beige walls gained color. Photo frames of the residents, young and strong in their days of glory, hung in loving tribute. Amid those pictures were new decorations, bright quilts, hand-painted canvases created by visiting school children, and bouquets of fresh flowers donated by families now emboldened to participate. Ethan observed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. He became a part of Maple Ridge more than he expected. Ranger also took on a role of his own. The residents called him Officer Ranger, protector of the old souls. He would lay his head on the knees of those who missed touch, sit beside veterans as they recounted stories they had carried alone for years, and whine when someone was sad. Therapy dogs could be trained, but Ranger didn't need to be taught empathy. He simply understood humans with a depth that felt almost spiritual. Evelyn Hayes thrived in that new chapter. Her cheeks regained a touch of color, and her hands, once trembling, steadied when she wrote letters or held Ranger's fur. She took short walks around the garden, leaning on a cane topped out with a carved wooden bird, one Ethan had given her as a gift. She insisted on attending the monthly resident council meetings where Helen encouraged open discussion. Every time Ethan visited, Evelyn would touch his arm and say, "You didn't just save us, you changed the ending of our story." Time, however, is never something humans can negotiate with. 2 years passed. Evelyn's strength faded the way leaves lose color in late autumn. Not sudden, not tragic, simply inevitable. One evening, Ethan sat beside her bed. Ranger lay at her feet, chin resting gently across her ankles. Evelyn reached out and stroked his ear. "He always knew when someone was hurting," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "He learned that from you." Her breath slowed in the following days. The staff, now fiercely protective of her, rotated shifts just to ensure she was never alone. Helen knitted a blanket in lavender and placed it over her legs. Sarah Daniels, now the lead medical director, checked on her constantly. Sarah had changed too. The stress lines along her brow faded over time, replaced by confidence and steadiness. She moved with purpose now, not exhaustion. She wore her hair down more often, soft and straight, resting against her shoulders instead of pulled into a tight, anxious knot. When she spoke with residents, her voice held the kind of calm strength that had always been inside her, finally free from suppression. On the morning Evelyn passed, sunlight filtered into her room like a soft blessing. Ranger was the first to sense it. He stood, pressed his nose to her hand, and let out a quiet, grieving sound Ethan had never heard before. Ethan leaned forward, placing his forehead against Evelyn's knuckles. Her skin felt cool but peaceful. She had left without fear. She left surrounded by dignity. Ethan didn't cry, not because he lacked grief, but because there was a peace to her passing. Evelyn had gained back her voice, her laughter, and her honor before leaving this world. That was the victory. Maple Ridge arranged a memorial. Helen coordinated everything. Sarah printed her favorite photos, and Leonard, the once frail man, spoke a eulogy strong enough to make even the nurses cry. Ranger sat beside Ethan the entire time, motionless and noble, wearing a blue bandana with embroidered letters, "Forever our guardian." After the service, Ethan walked the long corridor toward the exit, Ranger's paws tapping quietly on the floor. He passed the wall of photographs, now complete with Evelyn's portrait smiling in front of a garden of irises. Beneath it hung a plaque that read, "She cared first. We cared back." Outside, a soft breeze carried the scent of flowers from a nearby magnolia tree. Ethan placed a hand on Ranger's head. "We finished this chapter," he said. Ranger's tail thumped softly against his leg. Ethan reached the truck. Before opening the door, he turned to Maple Ridge one last time. Inside those walls, he hadn't just uncovered evidence. He had learned something profound. War wasn't always fought in deserts or foreign countries. Sometimes it happened in brightly lit rooms with soft music and polished floors. Sometimes the battlefield was a place where silence was the enemy. And sometimes the greatest victory came not from defeating evil, but from restoring dignity to those who had been denied it. Ethan got into the truck, Ranger curled into the seat beside him, and they drove away into the spring morning, ready for whatever battle came next. In the end, this story is not only about stopping darkness, it is about what happens when ordinary people choose to protect the vulnerable. It reminds us that miracles are not always thunder from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly through a loyal dog, a weary doctor who refuses to give up, or one person brave enough to say, "No more." When Ethan fought for the forgotten, he didn't just expose cruelty, he restored dignity. He became the proof that God places warriors in unexpected places, and that true strength is found not in weapons, but in compassion. In our daily lives, we walk past countless battles we cannot see. A neighbor struggling alone, an elderly person who needs a voice, someone hurting silently. God does not always ask us to save the world, but He does ask us to notice, to care, to act. If this story touched your heart, share it so more people will be reminded that kindness still wins. Comment your thoughts, subscribe to follow more inspiring stories, and may God bless every one of you watching. May He guide your steps, protect your families, and give you the courage to stand up for what is right, even when no one is watching. Sometimes the miracle isn't the victory itself. Sometimes the miracle is you choosing to care.